Hello and good evening. Thank you for joining me tonight. I am, of course, Eddie McCoven, and we are in Decision 2020. This is the year to end all years. This is the election to end all elections, or so we have been told. Well, I'm not entirely sure about that, but we will, of course, take a look tonight at the vice presidential debate, and we will analyze what we have seen tonight. I want to thank my good friend Megan Dyke for helping me pick out some of the sound bites for tonight's recap and analysis of this debate. If you see me looking down on occasion, it's because I am running this whole live stream all by myself from my home studio. So I've got my tablet here down below me. I've got the broadcast camera in front of me, and so sometimes I have to look down to just make some adjustments or to bring up something else for you to see on the screen. So thank you for joining me tonight. Let me start off real quickly by saying tonight was a debate. Tonight was an exchange of ideas. Tonight really was what we would expect from two polished politicians getting together and, well, hashing out their ideas versus the other person's ideas. Tonight, of course, was the vice presidential debate, which a lot of us thought would be a lot different compared to the debate just over a week ago between President Trump and Democrat presidential nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden. Of course, with Vice President Mike Pence being a little more on the calm and reserved side, we expected things to go a little more smoothly. Well, they did, and they also didn't. But we'll get into that in just a moment. Again, I think it's good for us to notice that tonight really was something. Tonight really was a debate. And one of the things that I want to start right off the bat with is as soon as I can bring it up. Maybe I won't be able to bring it up because we've had a few things not... there we go. Cool. We can make this happen. I want to start off like I did last time, which is I'm going to talk about what one candidate said. I'll talk about what another candidate said. Then I'll go ahead and play some sound from the debate, and then I'll deliver my closing remarks. My analysis will fall somewhere in between. You be the judge of that. Anyway, let's start off with Senator Kamala Harris. So Senator Harris did very well tonight. Very well. If you may remember, she was running out of the gate as a nominee for the party, one of the 25 candidates to vie, 26 at one point, to vie for the Democrat nomination. And she had a very strong start to her campaign, but then that strong start just, I don't know what happened. The steam ran out of that locomotive, and she eventually dropped out of the race. With the more famous line is, she's not a millionaire, she can't fund her own campaign. Well, that's very true. So she ends up getting picked as the vice presidential nominee to Joe Biden. And I thought the senator did a very good job tonight. She answered most of the questions that were brought her way. So did Vice President Pence, although he deflected quite a bit. I'll get into that in just a moment as well. So the interesting thing that right off the bat, with Senator Harris coming out of the gate is saying that the Trump-Pence administration has been the greatest failure of any presidential administration in U.S. history. And I thought that was pretty telling. And I thought that was a pretty bold and a pretty broad statement to say. If you make a statement like that, you should be able to back it up. She did for the most part, going right into the administration's response on COVID-19 and this pandemic. Especially talking about the number of dead bodies, really just painting a picture here of the response. And, the other thing is that she says, when she was asked about the vaccine, if the vaccine were to come available, would she actually take it? Which if the vaccine came available either before or just after the election, would she take the COVID-19 vaccine? Senator Harris said, if the doctors and the health professionals say to take the vaccine, she will take it. If President Trump says to take it, well, she says she will not. So that's quite interesting. What happens, my question is, what happens if Dr. Fauci or somebody else, one of the high-level health experts in this country, says, take the vaccine, and then President Trump gets on the mic after them or in the next tweet or in the next press conference and says, take the vaccine. Senator Harris, will you then not take the vaccine? Because the president said to take it, so you said no. So which is it? Is it going to be take the vaccine or not? She gave an answer. I'm not really sure if it was a thorough enough answer, but you be the judge of that. She did say that she was informed with the pick that she was the vice presidential pick by the Biden campaign via Zoom. Biden, interesting enough, said it was a phone call. So she clarified that tonight, said it was Zoom. He said it was a phone call. Maybe he did Zoom on his phone. I don't know. I've done Zoom on my phone. Maybe he just didn't realize that this was a separate app and not just FaceTime or a phone call. Anyway, so the other thing is that Harris claims that a Biden-Harris administration will be lifting up the American people after a divisive Trump-Pence administration. Well, we'll see if that actually happens. We've heard people saying that Bush 43 was a divisive president, along with Dick Cheney as his vice. We've had other people say that the Obama-Biden administration was the most divisive. I think we're just in a time where, just as people say every election is now the most important election, I think now we're going to be in that time frame where people say, unfortunately, that, well, this administration is the most divisive. This administration is the most divisive. Why don't we just stop electing divisive administrations? I think that would solve that. But we'll get to that in just a moment. And that was that question was actually as a part of a response when the moderator asked, has there been any talks with presidential health? Because both of these vice presidential nominees are working with or will be working with presidents who are going to be the oldest presidents. If President Trump is granted another 4 years by the electorate, he will be 74, the oldest serving president in the history of the United States. If former Vice President Joe Biden were to pull off the win in just 27 days from now, then he would also be the oldest vice president, coming in at 78. So this is telling, because in this advanced age, and as we've seen, of course, with Biden, people questioning whether or not that the vice president has any of that cognitive ability, whether or not that he could actually pull this off, whether he could actually serve for a full term. People question, well, maybe, just maybe, he'll pull off a year, 2 years maybe, and then Kamala Harris will become president. Interesting enough, that would be one way to become the first female president, come in as vice president. The president then, for whatever reason, can't complete his duties as discharged in the Constitution. The vice president takes over. Kamala Harris would be the first woman vice president. Or excuse me, president. First woman president. But interesting, the question that was posed to both of them, especially posed to Vice President Pence, who is 61, to his president, our president, Donald Trump, who is 74, who's had a recent medical episode, contracting the coronavirus, being treated in the hospital for that. The question posed to them, has there been any talk about the line of succession? Has there been any talk about transitioning the role of the president to the vice president, having the president step down for whatever reason? Has there been any talk about that? Kamala Harris didn't answer the question. Vice President Pence also did not answer the question. So one of the other things that Senator Harris claims is that the Biden-Harris administration will be transparent, and she claims that Joe Biden, through his 47 years in Congress, has been, or 47 years in D.C., has been nothing but transparent. She, of course, jumped on the Trump taxes bandwagon. And her biggest question out of that, though, and I thought this was a good question, was who does the president owe money to? Now, of course, these debts were incurred when President Trump was a private citizen. These were not debts incurred as a sitting president. These were debts incurred through the operations of his company as a private citizen. So, well, who does he? That's a good question, Senator Harris. Who does President Trump owe money to? And she raised another question. Does that influence some of the president's policy? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Senator Harris also claimed that, unlike President Trump, Biden is honest. She also said that the health and strength of our economy depend on the health and strength of the American people. And it's interesting because that kind of goes back to what Joe Biden said in the debate last week, that we have to fix COVID first before we can work on the economy, alluding to the fact that he may go ahead and just shut the whole economy down once he becomes president. And, you know, Kamala Harris also took a moment to say, no. There is no end of fracking. We don't support the Green New Deal. We'll play a clip on that in just a moment. The interesting thing enough is when Vice President Pence brought up foreign policy and brought up the Trump administration's attack on Soleimani, the Iranian military leader who they took out with a military strike. She did bring up the fact that received retaliation from Iran, which has injured soldiers. And of course, then she brought up the whole alleged comments that President Trump said about our men and women in uniform and veterans, saying that they're losers and suckers, and has allegedly said these disparaging remarks. She also invoked John McCain and briefly talked about the president and his remarks against the former POW and longtime senator who, of course, passed away. And she did talk about that, and she did say that a Biden-Harris administration, specifically that Joe Biden, would hold Russia accountable. Well, what does that mean? I guess we wait to see. And the other thing is, too, is that when it came time to talking about the Supreme Court and filling a vacancy on the court. She was very emphatic, of course, that we're in the middle of an election, we should wait. Vice President, of course, sticking to the Republican talking points on that. And then, of course, the Vice President goes after the I would say the attacks, you could call them that, you could call them attacks on the president's nominee for the Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett. Specifically, those attacks on her faith. And here is how Senator Kamala Harris responded to that.
Joe Biden and I are both people of faith, and it's insulting to suggest that we would knock anyone for their faith. And in fact, Joe, if elected, will be only the second practicing Catholic as President of the United States. On the issue of this nomination, Joe and I are very clear, as are the majority of the American people. We are 27 days before the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And, you know, before, when this conversation has come up, you know, it's been about election year or election time. We're literally in an election. Over 4 million people have voted. People are in the process of voting right now. And so Joe has been very clear, as the American people are. Let the American people fill that seat in the White House, and then we'll fill that seat on the United States Supreme Court.
And of course, Senator Harris said that the president, that the Trump-Pence administration wants to completely get rid of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, something that the, of course, Supreme Court will likely have to decide on. The other thing is, she said not one of the president's judicial nominees, saying that she serves on the Judicial Committee, she's saying not one of President Trump's nominees has been black, a person of color. So that was a very telling moment there as well in the shaping of the court by the current administration. Coming to the point of ethnic violence, racism, the tragic events that are going on in our country, Senator Harris was posed with the question of if justice was served in the most recent grand jury indictment in relation to the killing of Breonna Taylor. She said justice was not served, and that under a Biden-Harris administration there would be police reform. She went as far as saying if the ban on chokeholds and the carotid hold, like they are proposing, and that a Biden-Harris administration would apparently enact, then George Floyd would still be alive. Well, that remains to be seen as well, because you have to remember, Joe Biden is the author of the 1994 crime bill. Kamala Harris, former Attorney General of California, put a lot of people of color in jail. And as we remember from that debate with Tulsi Gabbard, kept them there quite a long time. Some people have argued that Biden and Harris is just the police state running for president and vice president. So will they enact reforms? It's possible. Could President Trump, with vice president and presumably with a Republican Senate, enact reforms on policing? They probably could. Have we enacted more reforms yet? Not much has really happened, but we'll see what the future holds on that particular subject. Continuing on, though, with criminal justice reform, which President Trump has begun, Senator Harris said she and President Biden, or she and a President Biden rather, would get rid of private prisons, would get rid of cash bail, and would decriminalize marijuana. Great. Let's decriminalize it already. In fact, why hasn't it been done now? Why wasn't it done 3 years ago? Anything that's not really harmful to you, and marijuana is not. In fact, marijuana has done a lot of good for a lot of people, especially people with serious illnesses. So why is it still a Scheduled 1 controlled substance? Why? We need to decriminalize marijuana, and if Senator Harris is intent on it, good for her. But I say, what's the holdup? Let's get it done now. In fact, I say, introduce a bill, Senator Harris. Let's get it on the books now. Let's get it out of committee now and get it pushed through now. Or why not in the past few years have you not done it? Why wait to become president or vice president to do something when you can do it as one of the most arguably influential members of Congress? Just saying. Interesting enough, there was, like I said, a couple of spats between the two of them, including where she said that she would not be lectured by the vice president about law and order and prosecution, being a former attorney general. She did go after the fact that the president, she says, refused to condemn white supremacy. And she does say that there is implicit bias in policing, and there is implicit bias in this country. I want to play for you real quick one of those squabbles from Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. Let's take a listen.
This is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well, wait.
I'm speaking.
It'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break every single year. Senator,
that is
that's the math.
Not true. That
Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation. Okay?
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act that brought America back. And now the Trump-Pence administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster.
Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. You yourself said on multiple occasions when you were running for president that you would ban fracking. Joe Biden looked at his supporter in the eye and pointed and said, I guarantee that we will abolish fossil fuels. They have a $2 trillion version of the Green New Deal, Susan, that your newspaper, USA Today, said really wasn't that very different from the original Green New Deal. More taxes, more regulation, banning fracking, abolishing fossil fuel, crushing American energy, and economic surrender to China. is a prescription for economic decline. President Trump and I will keep America growing.
Well, I think we should move on to the Vice President now. Vice President Pence said that the Trump administration has already reduced more CO2 than other countries in the world. I think we're back. All right, here we go. Now we are back. Sorry about that. I had a little bit of technical difficulties. That's what happens when you don't charge your tablet. It stops working after a while. Anyway, so I was just getting started with the Vice President here, and let's see if I can pull up the Vice President and go from there and talk about his performance tonight. There we go. All right, now it looks like we've got all systems go here. So the Vice President said that he talked about Biden and Harris wanting to return to the Paris Climate Accord. Well, the Vice President said, you know what? The United States has actually reduced more of the CO2 emissions than any other country that's currently in the Paris Climate Accord. So that's interesting. I'd like to see the numbers on that. Of course, Paris Climate Accord, don't know if we should be in it, don't know if we shouldn't be in it. You tell me. He did insist, of course, that they would ban fracking, that Biden and Harris would ban fracking. It's interesting, though, that he says that in terms of climate change, he said that the forest management needs to be done better to prevent wildfires, especially in California, which, of course, Governor Gavin Newsom of California met with President Trump in recent weeks with all of the wildfires going on in the state, and everybody likes to point to climate change. I'd like to point to power companies whose equipment continues to fail, like PG&E, and start fires. But we digress. People say it's climate change. That's why we're having so many wildfires. Of course, there is some truth to managing the forest, meaning clearing out the undergrowth, thinning out the trees so not much can be destroyed. Defensible space, as we've heard, around people's properties. That's all good and true. But interesting enough is when Vice President Pence brought that up, that quite a bit of land in California is actually not under the control of the California state government. It's under the control of the federal government. So that means the federal government actually has not been doing a good job in terms of managing the forest. So I just wanted to bring that up. Yeah, he did say that, coming back to Kamala Harris's remarks, that the Biden-Harris administration is not going to raise taxes. He said, well, no, Biden has said he wants to repeal the Trump tax cuts. Exactly how much, I guess, is the question. And he did point out that they do want to support some type of Green New Deal, and he pointed out that Senator Harris was the first senator to sign on to the Green New Deal, which came out of the House of Representatives. And, you know, the other thing is that of course, he did bring up the fact that in terms of foreign policy, the moving of the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, recognizing it as the capital city, the taking out of the top Iranian military official, and, went on to this whole thing about the Democrats attacking the faith of the Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. And of course, the issue that Harris brought up and other people brought up is, what about the issues of women's rights and the so-called reproductive rights? And, Vice President just came out and said it. Vice President Pence said, I'm pro-life and I don't apologize for it. Now, whether that means he's going to restrict at a federal level or make sure that that happens through the court somehow, that somehow there would be restrictions on abortion, well, people will argue one way, people will argue the other. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's just me being a little more on the optimistic side. And he did point out, though, that Senator Harris would not answer, and as previously, former Vice President Biden did not answer, whether the two would pack the court if Judge Amy Coney Barrett got in and became a Supreme Court justice this year, when they don't want her to be, because they want to hopefully get elected and, choose who they want on the court. But there's been this threat going around that the Democrats would pack the court. They would add more seats to the Supreme Court and, of course, put all these, who know what, but their own pick on there. And Vice President Pence asked her if she would be packing the court. She did not answer that. And, of course, he pointed out that she did not answer it. And then he hoped that Joe Biden would answer that next week in the next presidential debate. In terms of the racial injustice going on, especially with the Breonna Taylor case, unfortunately, I think this was a moment where the vice president could have shined, and he did not. Instead, he took the hard line. He said that he trusts the justice system that we have. He trusts that the grand jury got it right, and said to Kamala Harris, as a former prosecutor, she should be trusting the grand jury on this. And he did go into the rioting thing real quick, saying there's no excuse for the rioting that's occurred after the death of George Floyd. And he has said that the Trump-Pence administration will always stand on the side of law enforcement. That was a moment, I think, for the vice president to shine, especially to black voters. And I think he missed that opportunity tonight. Furthering on this discussion on racism, he defended the president's record, saying the president has, on occasion, condemned the KKK and white supremacy. And, of course, commenting on Kamala Harris's record as the former San Francisco District Attorney and later Attorney General of California, her record of prosecuting more persons of color. When asked about the transition of power and asked about what the vice president, or what Kamala Harris said she would do as the vice president when posed with, some situation where President Trump would refuse a peaceful transition of power, her response to that was simply just vote early. That was her response to that. And she accused the president of openly trying to suppress the vote. Vice President Pence came back with that and said, well, he's confident that they're going to win re-election. All right. And then he pointed out something I thought that was very good. He said, accepting the results of an election, he said that the Democrats have been trying for 3 years to basically undo the results of the 2016 election, and I buy that. I buy that argument. There's been investigation, there's been investigations, there's been multiple, impeachment. It seems like there's been nothing but attempts to try to get the president out, and he's still here. So maybe the vice president is right on this one. Maybe it's the Democrats who in 2016 refused to have a peaceful transition of power with their war and investigation against President Trump. Or maybe not. So It's interesting, though, because tonight I will tell you that I wanted to hear not just from the not from Senator Harris, the former AG, is what I was going to say. I didn't want to just hear from her, and I didn't want to just hear from, Vice President Pence. I will tell you who I wanted to hear from tonight. I wanted to hear from two other vice presidential nominees, Jeremy Spike Cohen of the Libertarian Party, Angela Walker of the Green Party, running with Howie Hawkins. Of course, Spike Cohen is running with Jo Jorgensen on the Libertarian ticket. Angela Walker running with Howie Hawkins on the Green Party ticket. I would have loved to hear from these two tonight, especially with the issues of coronavirus, the economy, the Paris Climate Accord, the Supreme Court. You name it, I would have loved to have heard about it. And I would have loved if we could have included those people in. Of course, the Libertarian Party has ballot access in all 50 states. All 50 states. Meaning they could win. They have a chance to win. The Green Party has ballot access in about 30 states. I guess if you crunch the numbers right, could lead to a possible victory. And again, I ask, why? Why are the debate stages for just Democrats and Republicans and no one else? Well, if you want to run a duopoly, you do everything you can to keep out the competition. And I think that is what is going on here. I think that's what the Democrats and the Republicans are doing through the Commission on Presidential Debates. They're keeping people from other parties with other opinions, with other policies that deserve to be heard by the American people. They're keeping those away. Are they scared? Why would you be scared of competition? Competition is a healthy thing, unless you're just trying to stay in power. I don't know if that's what these two are trying to do, but it could be. It could be what the Democrats and Republicans are trying to do. I don't really know. I'd like to hear more people, though. And I think the American public would like to hear more voices on the debate stage. You can help out by Googling Jo Jorgensen or Spike Cohen or Howie Hawkins or Angela Walker. You can write in to the Commission on Presidential Debates. They're on Twitter. You can send them a message. You can tag them in a post. But I think if you're on the ballot in all 50 states, I think you should be automatically included. If you're on fewer than 50 states, maybe there does have to be some kind of polling to indicate whether you participate or not. But I think it's time to include more voices in our debates. So tonight's debate. Tonight's debate is very interesting because it was really a debate, I feel. It was really a debate between two people sharing ideas exchanging ideas. There were, of course, more interruptions tonight, not as many as the debate with President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. But it seemed that Vice President Pence was doing a fair amount of interrupting and going over his time. When it came down to it, though, even though they both didn't answer questions or deflected, Vice President Pence did it more. And I think he really failed to shine in some of those moments. For that, since this really was a debate tonight, I think I can call a winner. And I'm going to say that Senator Kamala Harris won tonight's debate. I know that's going to run me afoul with some of my Twitter followers, but I think that's what it is. I call it like it is, or at least I try to. Kamala Harris had the answers. She stood her ground when being interrupted. She did not call Vice President Pence a clown. She did not say, "Come on, man." She did not lose her cool. She was perseverant. So, good job, Senator Harris. Too bad we don't have another debate between the two of them, since it is a good possibility that one of them probably will become president, considering the advanced age and health concerns of their running mates. Thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate it, especially with our technical difficulties. The next presidential election is next week. So I think maybe I'll have a beer, I'll watch it, and then I'll do what I did tonight, which is get on here and talk with you all. And hopefully you'll get something out of what I say, or not. But in the end, you choose. And choice is important. Get out there and vote this election and every election. Don't take your vote for granted. And don't let anybody tell you that you're wasting your vote if you happen to vote for a candidate other than they say you should be voting for, or if you're not voting for the Democrat or the Republican, or if you're voting some other way on a proposition than perhaps the polling numbers say it's going. Don't let anybody say that you're wasting your vote. The only wasted vote is the one not cast. Thank you for listening tonight. Good night, America. Educate yourselves and participate in this election. Good night.